Now, as you can see, the first question has a description of a vowel. So this is the central vowel, I believe, schwa, with different pitch variations, as in kar and kar in a language. And this is an example of contrastive distribution. So can you explain in detail why is this an example of contrastive distribution? You know, the description of the schwa vowel, the central vowel, with different pitch variations, as in kar and kar, those two distinctively accented uh, use of the central vowel in different words. So, this is an example of contrastive distribution. Can you explain elaborately why and what this really means?
Certainly. Contrastive distribution occurs when two sounds can appear in the same phonetic environment, but change the meaning of a word. In the case of the vowel schwa, with different pitch variations, the pitch changes create differences in meaning between words. For instance, if we have two words like carb and curb, where the only difference is the pitch of the schwa vowel, this pitch variation is used to distinguish between these words. This means that the pitch variation is not just an accidental feature, but a crucial part of how meaning is conveyed. In contrastive distribution, these sounds, though they are phonetically similar, function to differentiate meaning. In contrast, complementary distribution happens when two sounds never appear in the same phonetic context and thus do not affect meaning. For example, if two different sounds appear in different environments without overlapping, they are in complementary distribution. So in your example, the different pitch variations of schwa are used to create distinct words, making them a case of contrastive distribution, because the pitch changes are functionally significant in distinguishing meaning.
So, what does contrastive distribution mean in simple terms?
In simple terms, contrastive distribution means that two different sounds are used in the same position in words, and each sound changes the meaning of the word. For example, if changing a vowel sound changes the word from bat to bet, those sounds are in contrastive distribution.
Now, moving on to the next question, what are the major class features? So, major class features, what are the major class features? So, syllabic, sonorant, and consonantal are the major class features. Now, why are the syllabic, sonorant, and consonantal classified as major class features? What is the criteria behind them being classified as major class features?
Syllabic, sonorant, and consonantal are classified as major class features because they are fundamental in distinguishing broad categories of sounds in languages. Syllabic refers to whether a sound can form the nucleus of a syllable, like vowels. Sonorant includes sounds that are produced with continuous non-turbulent airflow, like vowels and nasals, which are generally more sonorous than obstruents. Consonantal distinguishes sounds produced with significant constriction in the vocal tract, like most consonants, from those produced with less constriction, like vowels. These features help define the basic categories of sounds used in speech, making them crucial for phonological analysis.
So what makes them eligible as major class feature as compared to the other mechanisms, other phonological mechanisms, as mentioned in the other options, like anterior, coronal, distributed, vocoid, continuant, obstruent, lateral.
The major class features, syllabic, sonorant, and consonantal, are foundational because they broadly categorize sounds based on their essential roles in forming syllables and distinguishing sound types. Syllabic identifies whether a sound can act as the center of a syllable, which is crucial for understanding the structure of words. Sonorant covers sounds that are more sonorous and typically function as the nucleus of syllables, distinguishing them from less sonorous sounds. Consonantal differentiates sounds with significant constriction from those with less, affecting how we categorize sounds into vowels and consonants. In contrast, features like anterior, coronal, and distributed describe specific articulatory characteristics of sounds and are used within the framework of the major class features, but do not categorize sounds as broadly. Similarly, vocoid and continuum refer to more specific attributes or gradations rather than broad categories.
So, explain to me in detail what are anterior, coronal, distributed, vocoid, and then lateral sounds, obstruent sounds. So, as far as I understand, lateral sounds are la and ra, whereas the obstruent sounds they are probably created with some obstruction in the airflow. I believe so. So, go ahead and explain to me these terminologies.
Let's break down each term. Anterior refers to sounds produced with the constriction towards the front of the mouth, like ND. These sounds are made with the tongue positioned towards the front. Coronal. This is a broader category that includes sounds articulated with the tongue's blade or tip, such as ens. These are often anterior sounds, but not all coronal sounds are necessarily anterior. Distributed refers to sounds where the constriction is spread out across a larger area of the vocal tract. For example, S is distributed because the airflow is directed across a relatively broad area of the tongue and the roof of the mouth. Vocoid refers to sounds with vocalic properties, but not necessarily fully vowel-like. For example, W and J are vocoids. They have vowel-like qualities, but also function as consonants, lateral sounds. These are produced by allowing the airflow to escape around the sides of the tongue. For example, L is a lateral sound
L.
because the air flows around the sides of the tongue while the tip is in contact with the roof of the mouth. Upsounds. These are produced with a significant constriction of the airflow, leading to turbulence. This category includes stops like T, K, fricatives like S, and affricates like Sh, J. The constriction causes noise and turbulence, distinguishing them from sonorants. Each term helps describe specific ways sounds are articulated and categorized in phonology.
All right, let's move on to the next question. So, the next question is pitch. And pitch, as we have already probably discussed, it is measured in terms of frequency, and frequency is the number of cycles per second. It is measured in the terms of hertz. Higher the frequency, more the number of cycles, and higher the value of the pitch, and vice versa. And pitch relates to the auditory phonetics.
Yes, you've got it right. Pitch is indeed related to how we perceive the frequency of a sound. The frequency, measured in hertz, tells us how many times a sound wave cycles per second. Higher frequencies are perceived as higher pitches, and lower frequencies are heard as lower pitches. This aspect of sound perception falls under auditory phonetics, which focuses on how we perceive and interpret sounds rather than how they are produced or their physical properties.
Okay, moving on to the next question. So, sounds produced with a stricture in the front of the palato-alveolar region are called what? So, they are called They are called anteriors, actually. So, explain that to me.
Sounds described as anteriors are produced with stricture or constriction towards the front part of the oral cavity, specifically in the area in front of the palato-alveolar region. This includes sounds made with the tongue closer to the front teeth or the alveolar ridge, like T, D, Is, and N. In contrast, sounds made further back, such as K or G, are considered non-anterior or produced in the postalveolar or velar regions.
All right, moving on to the next question. So it has two assertions. First assertion says that it is assumed that word formation rules of morphology are directly paired with the phonological rules grouped together at various levels. That is true. It is true to say that it is assumed that word formation rules of morphology are directly paired with the phonological rules grouped together at various levels. The second, that the output of the morphological level undergoes the phonological rules of that level. So both are true. Now, can you quickly detail on what these two assertions, what these two assertions really mean?
Sure. The first assertion means that in morphological theory, the rules for forming words, like adding prefixes or suffixes, are thought to interact with phonological rules at different levels of analysis. For example, how a word is formed can influence its pronunciation. The second assertion suggests that once a word is formed through morphology, it then undergoes phonological processing according to the phonological rules of the language. This means that after applying morphological rules, the resulting word will be subject to pronunciation adjustments based on phonological patterns. Essentially, the structure of the word affects how it is pronounced.
Now, the next question is the morphological model in which the relationship between word forms is that of replacement. So, the morphological model in which the relationship between word forms is that of replacement is the item and process model. Now, I don't have any idea about what this statement or what this this model of the the item and process model, what this really means. So I want you to elaborate on what item and process model is, and what does this statement in reference to the item and process model really signify.
The item and process model is a way of analyzing how word forms are related to each other in morphology. In this model, the focus is on how specific word forms, items, can be transformed or replaced through various processes. Here's a simpler way to understand it. Imagine you have a word like play. In the item and process model, you look at how play changes into played or playing. The item refers to the base word, and the process refers to the rules or patterns, like adding suffixes, that modify the base word to create new forms. So when we say that the relationship between word forms in this model is one of replacement, it means that you're examining how one form, like play, can be replaced or transformed into another, like played, through specific morphological processes. This model helps in understanding how word formation and transformation work in a structured way.
Now, what is item and arrangement model? One of the options as mentioned in the same question. So, elaborate what is item and arrangement model?
The item and arrangement model is another approach to studying morphology. Unlike the item and process model, which focuses on transformations and processes, the item and arrangement model emphasizes the organization of word components. In this model, items are the basic units or morphemes, the smallest meaningful units of language, and arrangement refers to how these items are ordered or combined to form words. For example, in the word unhappiness, the items are un, happy, and ness, and the arrangement describes how these morphemes come together to create the final word. This model helps analyze how different morphemes are combined and arranged in word formation.
Can you re-explain everything? You know what the item and arrangement model is like. I did not get it. So, give me a simpler explanation followed by a complex explanation.
Sure. Simple explanation. The item and arrangement model is about how words are built from different pieces called morphemes. Think of it like putting together a puzzle. Each piece, morpheme, is fixed, and you just arrange them in different ways to create new words. For example, in the word unhappiness, un, happy, and ness are the pieces, and you arrange them to form the word. Complex explanation. The item and arrangement model views morphology as the study of how individual morphemes, the smallest units of meaning, are combined to form words. In this model, morphemes are treated as discrete static units. The focus is on how these morphemes are arranged or sequenced according to specific rules to create words. This model contrasts with the item and process model, which emphasizes morphological transformations and processes. The item and arrangement model is used to analyze word formation by examining how different morphemes are systematically combined without changing the structure of the morphemes themselves.
Now the next is word and paradigm model. So what is word and paradigm model? This is one of the options as mentioned in the same question. So explain to me in detail what word paradigm model is.
The word and paradigm model is a way to understand how words are related through their forms and patterns within a language. Simple explanation. Imagine you have different forms of a word like walk, walks, walked, and walking. The word and paradigm model looks at these forms as part of a set or paradigm. Each word belongs to a pattern or set of forms that follow specific rules. This model focuses on how words change based on their grammatical role, like tense or number. Complex explanation. In the word and paradigm model, morphology is analyzed through paradigms, which are sets of related word forms. Each word has a paradigm that shows how it can change according to grammatical features like tense, case, or number. For example, in Latin, the word amare, to love, has different forms for different cases and numbers. The model emphasizes how these forms are systematically related within a paradigm, providing a structure for understanding inflectional patterns. This contrasts with models that treat morphemes as discrete elements and focus more on the processes of word formation. The word and paradigm model helps to explain the internal consistency and systematic nature of morphological changes across different word forms.
So the what the word and paradigm model really explains is that how words are conjugated in terms of differences between a person, number, and gender in order to give rise to new word forms, or altered new forms to manage different situations that are presented by the person, number, and gender. Is that a correct explanation to the word and paradigm model?
Yes, that's a good explanation. The word and paradigm model focuses on how words change their forms to reflect grammatical features like tense, number, person, or gender. For example, in languages with rich inflectional systems, verbs or nouns might have multiple forms depending on who is speaking, the time of the action, or other grammatical categories. This model helps to understand these changes as part of a structured system of related forms or paradigms.
All right, moving on to the next question. So, the difference between root and stem can be characterized as the first option: a derivational suffix can be attached only to a root. Second, a root can be further analyzed, whereas stem cannot be. Third, a root and a stem cannot be further analyzed. Fourth, a derivational suffix can be attached only to the stem. So I think the difference between root and stem can be characterized as a derivational suffix can be attached only to a stem, or a root. I don't know. So the correct answer to this question is that a derivational suffix can be attached only to a stem. Now, can you elaborate on what really this is, and what this statement explains about the root and stem, and also detail explain what root and stem are, and exemplify as well.
Sure, let's break it down. Root and stem. Root. This is the core part of a word that carries its primary meaning. It cannot be further divided into smaller meaningful parts. For instance, in the word happiness, happy is the root. Stem, this is a base form to which affixes, prefixes, suffixes are added. It might include a root plus any additional elements that are necessary for forming different grammatical or derived forms of a word. For example, happy is the stem in happiness or unhappy. Derivational suffixes. Derivational suffixes are used to create a new word by attaching to a stem. They can change the word's meaning or its grammatical category. For example, adding nes to happy to form happiness, or adding un to happy to form unhappy. The statement, a derivational suffix can be attached only to a stem, means that you can't attach a derivational suffix directly to a root by itself. You need to have a stem first. Example, take the root act. To form action, act is combined with the derivational suffix ein to create a stem action. The root act alone does not have the capacity to take a derivational suffix without becoming a stem. In summary, a stem is what you need to work with to add derivational suffixes, not just the root alone.
So can you give me more details which further classify roots from stems, because I want to have a very conceptual clarity about the two.
Of course, let's dive deeper. Roots. Definition. A root is the most basic part of a word, containing the core meaning. It's not necessarily a standalone word, but is the base from which words are built. Characteristics. Cannot be broken down into smaller meaningful units. Represents the fundamental meaning of the word. Examples: in unbelievable, believe is the root. In predicted, dict from predict is the root. Stems. Definition. A stem is the form of a word to which affixes, prefixes, or suffixes are added. It can be a root by itself or a root plus additional elements. Characteristics. Can include roots along with additional derivational affixes that create a new word. Serves as the base form for adding inflections like tense, number, or derivational morphemes like suffixes for creating new words. Examples: in happiness, happy is the stem. Happy includes the root hap, a less common root form, and is further modified by the derivational suffix ness. Detailed differentiation. 1. Complexity. Root, usually simpler and only includes the essential meaning. It can be a single morpheme or part of a more complex stem. Stem can be more complex as it may include the root and additional elements. For example, replay has the stem play root with the prefix re. 2. Function. Root provides the base meaning but does not change on its own. Stem can be altered by affixes to form different words. For instance, act root becomes acting or actions with added suffixes. 3. Examples in morphological processes, derivational suffixes, modify a stem to create a new word. For example, beauty, stemless, beautiful. Inflectional suffixes modify a stem to indicate grammatical features like tense or number. For instance, walk stem equals walked. Understanding the difference helps in analyzing how words are formed and how meaning changes with different affixes.
Cool. Nice. All right, let's move on to the next question. So it has two assertions. The first assertion is that derivational affixes change the grammatical class of stems to which they are attached. So that is very true. Derivational affixes do change the grammatical class of the stems to which they are attached. The second assertion is that inflectional affixes do not change the grammatical class of the stem to which they are attached. That is also true. So both are true. Now moving on to the next question. So the study of the arrangement of the morphemes in a linear sequence is, of course, the syntactic morphotactics. So what is morphotactics? What does this term really signify? Morphotactics.
Morphotactics refers to the rules and patterns governing the sequence and arrangement of morphemes within words.
Okay.
Essentially, it deals with how morphemes, such as prefixes, roots, and suffixes, are organized and combined to form words. In simpler terms, it's like a set of guidelines for putting together the building blocks of words in a specific order. For example, in English, you can attach a suffix like ish, d to a verb to indicate past tense, but you can't arbitrarily place morphemes in any order. There are specific rules about how these affixes can be combined with roots. Morphotactics helps in understanding the structure and formation of words by specifying the permissible combinations and sequences of morphemes in a language.
Cool. Now I get it. So the arrangement of the morphemes in a linear sequence is the study of morphotactics. Moving on to the next question now. So sing becomes singer, play becomes player, write becomes writer, dance becomes dancer. The suffix er is indeed a nominalizer, right? So explain this to me. Why is this a nominalizer?
Yes, the suffix er is indeed considered a nominalizer. A nominalizer is an affix that turns a verb into a noun. In the examples you gave, sing becomes singer, play becomes player, write becomes writer, dance becomes dancer. In each case, adding er to the verb creates a noun that denotes someone who performs the action of the verb. So, singer refers to a person who sings, player refers to someone who plays, and so on. The suffix er essentially converts the action or process described by the verb into a person or thing associated with that action. This is why it's classified as a nominalizer.
Okay, moving on to the next question. The first assertion, quantifier raising applies in the mapping from logical form to surface structure. So quantifier raising applies in the mapping from logical form to the surface structure. What does this statement really mean? What does this elaborate this statement? What mechanism is this statement explaining?
The statement about quantifier raising involves how certain elements in a sentence are positioned in linguistic theory. Here's a breakdown. Quantifier raising, QR. This is a syntactic mechanism used in transformational grammar. It describes how quantifiers, such as all, some, or every, are moved from their original position in a sentence to a different position to meet certain grammatical requirements. Mapping from logical form, LF, to surface structure, S structure. In linguistic theory, a sentence can be represented in two stages: its underlying, more abstract representation, logical form, and its final, spoken or written form, surface structure. QR explains how the quantifiers are moved during this transition. Application. When QR applies, it adjusts the position of the quantifiers to ensure the sentence's meaning aligns with its logical interpretation. This might involve moving a quantifier to a sentence's beginning or another position where it makes logical sense. In summary, the statement is explaining how quantifiers are repositioned during the process of forming the final spoken version of a sentence, ensuring consistency between its logical meaning and surface form.
So, what can you tell me about this same statement in simpler terms?
In simpler terms, quantifier raising is about moving words like all or some to a different place in a sentence to make sure the meaning is clear and correct when we speak or write it. It helps align the sentence's deeper meaning with how it actually sounds or looks.
Okay, so the alignment of how it sounds or looks to its deeper meaning, that's quantifier raising. Now, the second assertion is that quantifier raising moves a quantified noun phrase to clause initial position, giving structures similar to those assumed in logic. So the correct answer to this question is that one is true but two is false. So quantifier raising applies in the mapping from the logical form to the surface structure. That is a correct statement. The second assertion. So explain elaborately to me about the second assertion. What does this really mean?
The second assertion is about how quantifier raising moves phrases like every student or some book to the start of a clause. In simpler terms, it means that in sentences, these phrases are often moved to the beginning, similar to how they are positioned in formal logic. This helps to make sure the sentence makes sense and follows grammatical rules, but it doesn't always match up with the actual surface structure of the sentence, as spoken or written.
So quantifier raising moves a quantified noun phrase to the clause initial position, giving structures similar to those assumed in logic. So the second assertion is not correct. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. The second assertion is not correct. Quantifier raising involves moving quantified phrases to a position in the sentence where they are represented in logical form. But it doesn't always mean they end up at the clause's initial position in the surface structure.
Okay, so quantifier raising applies in the mapping from the logical form to the surface structure. And the second assertion that quantifier raising moves a quantified noun phrase to the clause initial position, giving it structures similar to those assumed in logic. So this assertion would have been correct if it was the following. So the quantifier raising moves a quantified noun phrase in the sentence, and this gives the structure. This gives a similar structure to those assumed in logic. This would have been a correct assertion, as I, as I, as I, presume.
Yes, if the second assertion had stated that quantifier raising moves the quantified noun phrase within the sentence to align with logical structures, without specifying that it must be clinicial, it would be a more accurate description.
Cool.
The key is that it aligns the sentence structure with logical representation, but the exact position can vary.
All right, let's move to the next question. The principle B of the binding theory states that the pronouns must be free in their local governing domain. So the correct answer should be that a pronominal is a free in its governing category. So principle A says that anaphors must be bound. Principle B says that pronominals must be free in their governing category. So the correct answer to this question, principle B of the binding theory, it states that the pronominal should be a free, or it should be free in its governing category. Principle C says that our expressions must be free everywhere. Now let's move on to the next question. The first assertion here is that the head parameter is concerned with the position of heads within phrases, right? That's true. The second assertion is that English is a head last language. No, because the word order followed in English sentence is SVO word order. So subject, verb, object word order in the English language. So one is true, but two is false. Tell me if anything is wrong with my explanation about the last question.
Your explanation is correct. Principle B of the binding theory indeed states that pronominals must be free in their governing category. As for the head parameter, it deals with the position of heads within phrases. And English is not a head last language. It follows a head initial order, so the second assertion is false. Thus, your understanding of both assertions is accurate.
Now, the next question is that which of the following is the head of a tall, thin bearded man? So, what is the head in this sentence? So, the man is indeed the head of this statement, this sentence. Now let's move on to the next question. In the X bar theory, the head of S is what? So the head of S in the X bar theory is indeed I, the inflection. Let's move on to the next question. Words like alive and dead are called what? So alive, dead. These are not complementary antonyms. So I don't know. I don't know. Okay, these are indeed complementary antonyms. So, complementary is something like if you talk about complementary distribution of the phonemes, then we have the phenomena that two allophones of the single phoneme cannot occur together in the same environment. So, for example, the aspirated s, as in pin, uh, it cannot have unaspirated pa, the other allophone of the phoneme pa, in the same position. It cannot be pin. It has to be the aspirated pa in that position, whereas the aspirated pa cannot occur in spin, where unaspirated pa occurs. So, my understanding of the complementary distribution of the allophones is the one that I just explained. Now, words like alive and dead are called complementary antonyms. I have no idea what that really is. Can you explain?
You're correct that alive and dead are complementary antonyms. These are pairs of words where the presence of one quality necessarily implies the absence of the other. In this case, being alive means not being dead, and vice versa. So when we talk about complementary antonyms, they are mutually exclusive. If something is one, it cannot be the other. This is different from gradable antonyms like hot and cold, where there is a range between the extremes, and both can be applied in different degrees.
So, what is the criteria for two words to be in the relation between those two words is that of complementary antonyms. So, complementary, as I understand, is something that gives a holistic view of all the aspects of an object. So, alive and dead are complementary antonyms. I don't understand how that works. Can you explain me in simpler terms, followed by the complex explanation?
Sure. In simpler terms, complementary antonyms are pairs of words where being one means you can't be the other. For example, alive and dead are complementary because if something is alive, it cannot be dead. And if it's dead, it cannot be alive. They cover all possible states, so there's no middle ground between them. In a more complex explanation, complementary antonyms represent a binary opposition where the presence of one term excludes the presence of the other. They do not allow for any overlap or middle state between them. This contrasts with gradable antonyms, where there are degrees or variations between the extremes, like hot and cold. Complementary antonyms typically deal with absolute categories, where the entire spectrum is covered by the two opposing terms.
Okay, I understand now. Let's move on to the next one. Speech Act theory was originally proposed by SAA Austin. So, tell me about that. What Speech Act theory is? Who proposed it? In which work of JL Austin did he propose the concept of Speech Act theory? What year was it? Uh, and what Speech Act theory really means? Let's talk about that. Give me all of those explanations about the Speech Act theory.
Speech Act theory was proposed by the philosopher J.L. Austin. He introduced it in his work titled How to Do Things with Words, which was published in 1962. The theory explores how people use language to perform actions rather than merely to convey information. According to Speech Act theory, when we speak, we are not only conveying information. information, but also performing various kinds of actions. For example, saying, "I promise to do this," is not just a statement, but an action of making a promise. Austin divided speech acts into three types: locutionary acts, the act of saying something; illocutionary acts, the act performed as one speaks, like making a promise; and perlocutionary acts, the effect of the speech act on the listener, like persuading them. In essence, the theory shows that language is used to achieve specific outcomes and can influence behavior and relationships.
All right, let's move on to the next one. The next is the formal language selected in formal semantics serves as the formal language that is selected in formal semantics, it serves as the input to a mechanism which pairs sentence of the language with truth conditions. So can you please go ahead and in detail elaborate this?
Sure. In formal semantics, a formal language is used to precisely represent the structure and meaning of sentences. This formal language serves as the input for a mechanism that pairs sentences with their truth conditions. Here's what that means. The formal language is designed to capture the logical structure of sentences. For example, it uses symbols and rules to represent the components of sentences and their relationships. The mechanism then analyzes these formal representations to determine under what conditions the sentences would be true or false. This process helps in understanding how meaning is constructed and interpreted in a rigorous and systematic way.
So can you just give me a quick, easy, not so technical explanation of what this statement really means? Because I'm getting confused here. This is too technical for me. I'm a layman.
Of course. Basically, formal semantics uses a special set of rules and symbols to write down sentences clearly. This helps in figuring out exactly when those sentences are true or false. It's like using a precise recipe to understand what makes a statement right or wrong.
Okay, so can you like give me exemplify a situation, a hypothetical situation where this statement could be applied?
Sure. Imagine you're analyzing the sentence, "The cat is on the mat." In formal semantics, you would use a set of symbols and rules to break down the sentence and map it to its truth conditions. So you'd set up a clear system to see when this sentence would be true, like if there's actually a cat on a mat in a given situation. If you know the rules, you can decide if the statement is true or false based on whether those conditions are met.
Okay, so the formal language selected in formal semantics serves as the input to the mechanism that pairs the sentence of the language with truth conditions. This statement simply means that there are identifiers of the identifiers of the constituents that are mentioned in the sentence, and those identifiers go on and pick those constituents from the sentence in order to compare it to the truth conditions. Is that what this statement means?
Yes, that's right. The formal language is a structured way to represent sentences. It helps you break down and identify the components of a sentence, which you then use to check if the sentence's meaning aligns with the real world conditions that would make it true or false.
All right, cool. Let's move on to the next question now. So, in the case of one lexeme with a variety of referents, we have an example of uh, polysemy, right?
In the case of one lexeme with a variety of reference, you're dealing with polysemy. Polysemy occurs when a single word or lexeme has multiple meanings that are related by a common concept. For example, the word bank can refer to the side of a river or a financial institution, both related by the idea of a place where something is stored or managed.
Now, the next question, a term used in semantic or logical analysis referring to a set of items which express contrasts in a quantity such as all, each, some. These, what is such a term which is used in semantic or logical analysis referring to the set of items that express contrasts in quantity, such as all, some, each. So I believe yes, the correct answer to this question is quantifier. Now elaborate this statement.
Yes, you're right. The term you're looking for is quantifier. In semantics and logic, quantifiers are words or phrases that indicate the quantity or amount of something in a statement. They help specify the extent to which a predicate applies to a subject. For example, all and some are quantifiers because they tell us how many members of a set are being referred to. All implies every member of the set, while some implies at least one, but not necessarily all. Similarly, each refers to individual members within a group, and these specifies particular items being discussed. In essence, quantifiers help us understand the scope and limits of statements in logical and semantic contexts.
So moving on to the next question, which is the concept of lexical diffusion, wherein spread of a sound change takes place step by step, was proposed by Wilhelm Schmidt, right?
Actually, the concept of lexical diffusion was proposed by William S. Leboeuf, not Wilhelm Schmidt. Lexical diffusion refers to the gradual spread of a sound change through a language, occurring incrementally as it affects different words at different times. Lovell's work emphasized how changes in pronunciation can spread unevenly across the vocabulary.
So, are you sure that you're sane and that your mind is sound is still functionable? Because the concept of lexical diffusion was proposed by William Wang and J. Krishnamurti.
It looks like there might be some confusion. While William Wang and J. Krishnamurti did discuss aspects of sound change, the concept of lexical diffusion is most commonly associated with William S. Leboeuf. Leboeuf's research in sociolinguistics extensively covered how sound changes spread through a language.
Oh no, you don't understand. The question number 21, which I've mentioned in the text that I provided you, has this question: the concept of lexical diffusion, wherein spread of sound change takes place step by step, was propounded by and one of the correct options in this question is Wang. That is William Wang and J. Krishnamurti. This was the lexical diffusion theory. The lexical diffusion theory stated that sound changes are lexically gradual and phonetically abrupt.
Got it. For question 21, the concept of lexical diffusion, where sound changes spread gradually through the lexicon, was indeed proposed by William Wang and J. Krishnamurti. This theory emphasizes that sound changes can occur gradually across different words while being phonetically abrupt when they do happen.
Really? So, okay, let's move on to the next question. So, the comparative method of reconstruction needs to be preceded by internal reconstruction. So, the comparative method of reconstruction needs to be preceded by internal reconstruction so that it will eliminate all the dialectal variations. And now, explain this statement in detail.
The comparative method and internal reconstruction are techniques used in historical linguistics to reconstruct ancestral languages. Internal reconstruction involves examining variations within a single language to identify older linguistic forms and processes. By analyzing how words and structures change within the language, we can infer what the language might have looked like in the past. Once internal reconstruction has clarified these historical forms and processes, the comparative method can be applied. This method compares similar languages or dialects to identify correspondences and differences, helping to reconstruct the features of a common ancestor language. So, the statement suggests that internal reconstruction helps establish a clearer picture of a language's history before comparing it with other languages. This process minimizes the effects of dialectal variations, allowing the comparative method to focus on reconstructing features common to all related languages.
So, can you give me a simpler explanation of what you just discussed about the the uh, comparative method of reconstruction being preceded by internal reconstruction, so that it eliminates the dialectal variations?
Sure. Internal reconstruction looks at changes within one language to understand its earlier forms. After figuring out this history, you use the comparative method to look at how different related languages compare. Doing internal reconstruction first helps you avoid confusing differences between dialects with genuine historical changes when you compare languages.
So can you repeat? Could you repeat that, because I could not catch it?
Certainly, internal reconstruction studies changes within a single language to understand its history. Once you have this background, you use the comparative method to compare different related languages. Doing internal reconstruction first helps you avoid mixing up dialect differences with real historical changes when comparing languages.
Thanks, that was helpful. Now let's move on to the next question. The mark the correct statement. Pigeonization takes place when two unrelated languages are in contact. Pigeons are used in a wide range of social contexts. Pigeonization requires a situation that involves at least three languages, and pigeons arise as a result of imperfect learning of a second language. So, I would say that pigeonization takes place when two unrelated languages are in contact is the correct statement. Correct statement. Now let's move on to the next question. An ideal informant is one who knows only one language, uses his language rarely, knows more than one language, has difficulty in remembering. An ideal informant is one who knows only one language. That's the correct answer to the question. Let's move on to the next question now. So, a lexical word losing its lexical status and becoming grammatical one is grammaticalization. Next question: social linguistic attitudes are indicated by referential and authentic factors, emotive and affective factors, affective and referential factors. So I think social linguistic attitudes are indicated by the emotive and affective factors. Now, can you explain me what this really means? Emotive and affective factors. How do they help to indicate the social linguistic attitudes?
Sociolinguistic attitudes are the feelings and opinions people have about different languages or dialects. Emotive factors are related to emotions, like pride or shame, that influence how we feel about a language. Affective factors are about how these feelings affect social interactions and perceptions. Together, they help us understand why people might prefer or avoid certain languages or dialects based on their personal and social experiences.
Can you in more detail and depth explain what this really means? The emotive and affective factor. What do these mean, and how do they relate uh, with the expression of the social linguistic attitudes in the society?
Sure, emotive and affective factors are key to understanding how people perceive and use language in social contexts. Emotive factors. These are feelings and emotions related to a language or dialect. For instance, if someone feels pride when speaking their native language or embarrassment about speaking a dialect, these are emotive factors. They influence how positively or negatively individuals view their own language or others. Affective factors. These refer to the broader impact of emotions on social behavior. They include how emotions affect language use and attitudes in social interactions. For example, if a community feels that a particular dialect is associated with lower social status, it may affect how people use or avoid that dialect. Together, these factors shape sociolinguistic attitudes by influencing 1. Language preferences, how individuals choose which languages or dialects to use in different settings. 2. Social identity, how people's feelings about their language contribute to their sense of belonging to a group. Language change, how societal attitudes towards certain languages or dialects can lead to language shift or maintenance. In summary, emotive and affective factors help us understand why language attitudes vary and how they impact social dynamics and language practices in a community.
The next question is language planning is not related to the planning of status planning, language acquisition, corpus planning, standardization of script. So, language planning is not related to the language to the planning of language acquisition. It does talk about status planning, corpus planning, and the standardization of the script. Corpus planning talks about what the language will include, what items and constituents will be present in the language. Status planning reflects the prestige level of the language and the needs needs for the the acceptance of the language by the people who are using it. And standardization of script basically means the writing and speaking the stuff related to the language. Am I correct?
Yes, you're right. Let's break it down. Status planning. This involves decisions about the role and prestige of a language in a society. It includes which languages will be used in government, education, and other official contexts. Corpus planning. This deals with the development and standardization of the language's content. It involves deciding on vocabulary, grammar rules, and other elements of the language. Standardization of script. This is about creating and formalizing the writing system of a language, including spelling rules and punctuation. This is not part of language planning. Instead, it refers to how individuals learn and acquire language, whether it's first language acquisition in children or second language learning in adults. So language planning focuses on status, corpus, and script, but not on how individuals learn the language.
So can you quickly give me a brief summary of what you just discussed?
Sure. Language planning includes status planning, deciding the role and prestige of a language in society; corpus planning, developing and standardizing the language's vocabulary and grammar; standardization of script, creating and formalizing the writing system; language acquisition, which is about how people learn languages, is not part of language planning.
The next question, a variety emerging in contact situation with a markedly reduced grammatical structure, lexicon, and stylistic range is certainly Pidgin, because Pidgin is the variety that emerges in a contact situation with a markedly reduced grammatical structure, lexicon, and the stylistic range, and is relatively simpler. The next question, a public movement advocating the recognition of a language as an official language in a state is an example of language movement. Now, language movement, a public movement advocating the recognition of a language as an official language in a state is an example of indeed the language movement. A logical question. Now, the next, a technique used in research where a researcher becomes part of the group which he or she wishes to study for an extended period is known as, of course, the participant observation technique, right?